So, what I am going to be doing is I am going to be taking you through the 12 weeks in the next few minutes, right. Whatever I am going to be doing in the next 12 weeks, I will be giving a gist of that in the next few minutes, and then we will also see how all of these are connected, and then the answer for why we are doing this would come into then the answer for why we are doing this would be very clear at the end of this. Okay. So, before that, we will start looking at what kinds of things that we can do with the text that we have in hand. So, before that, let me first describe what this corpus is. So, corpus is nothing but a collection of documents. For example, you have been studying for certain topics, let us say operating systems in computer science. You start collecting various information related to chapter from the web, some research papers and so on. So, at the end of the course, you might be having about 100 or 150 document that you have in hand. So, that collection is called as a corpus. You can name that corpus as an operating system corpus. So, that contains the relevant information related to certain topic. So, in this natural language processing application, we will always be dealing with certain corpus. We require large collection of documents in order for us to deal with certain applications. Okay. So, that is about the corpus. Okay. What else I can do with that corpus? So, when you are given a text for the first time, what you will start looking at, right. So, when you start looking at that, you will say, okay, I am seeing a lot of keywords, and then you will start underlining certain new words, and then you will start underlining certain words that you do not understand or do not know the meaning of that. You will start underlining some important sentences as the next step and so on, right. So, we start looking at information from a very high level and then slowly start getting into a deeper and deeper level, and at the end of that you would know what the document is all about, right. So, the same thing that we are going to be doing in the entire course. So, we are going to be looking at the documents at a very high level to begin with, and then start looking at it at a deeper level as we go further down the course. So, for all of us to do certain operations on that corpus, we require certain tools and techniques, right. So, first thing what we do is we will just look at the documents from a very high level, okay. And since we are talking about the corpus, so it is going to be having lots of words in the corpus, right. So, that is first thing that we want to look at. Okay, it contains about 1 billion words, it contains 500 million words, it contains about 50,000 vocabulary. Rest of the words are all repeated or repetitions of the vocabulary. And certain words are useful in connecting these sentences, but not really useful in terms of understanding the content of the documents. For example, the, of, in, we call them as stop words, and we say, okay, they are not going to be really providing me some good information related to the content. So, I can probably remove them. We call them as stop words. We will go through that one by one, in this. Okay, so first what we do is we start identifying the paragraphs and sentences in the document. The second one that we look at is, okay, so how many words are in the paragraph? Okay, we call them as tokens here, right. So, how many tokens are there? The tokens are nothing but words separated by space, and then we start counting the number of tokens. So, how many words are found in the corpus? We start looking at the frequency of the terms. For example, in this particular slide, how many times tokens, the word token has appeared. So, that is called the frequency of that. That is the number of tokens or words. So, in this slide we have about we have 3. So, in this slide tokens had appeared 3 times. So, in the entire collection of my 12 weeks PowerPoint presentation or PDF, this word has occurred at least 300 times. Okay, so, that is something that we start counting at a very high level without really knowing what the meaning is, right. So, we just start counting the words. So, that is where we start looking at the frequency of word, and then we start looking at the vocabulary count. Vocabulary count is nothing but the set of words, right. So, you just take the set of all the words that you have, it will give you only the unique words that it found in the entire corpus. So, most of the time the vocabulary for a very large corpus would be around 50K. Okay. And then find patterns of the words. So, how many times certain words occur together? So, how many times there are 2 words that occur always together, 3 words that always occur together. So, that is something that we want to look at. So, we will just look at this particular pattern occurs few times in this document. So, as I mentioned, we look at the term frequency, and then we also look at based on the vocabulary and the total number of words in the document, we try to find out what could be the type token ratio. Is it going to be it is going to be the same for all corpus, or it is going to be very different. So, there are certain empirical formula that we start looking at by just doing the statistical counting of all the words, and then we start looking at how many times this particular word had occurred in the entire corpus. So, we use some ratio to figure out this inverse document frequency. We will talk about that in little later in the next session and so on. And then there are other empirical formulas or hypotheses that are available. They are called Zipf and Mandelbrot. So, Zipf tells the term frequency is proportional to the rank. For example, when you start ranking them in terms of the frequency, right, the highest frequency will be, let us say, start with 0, the will have the highest frequency. This is most commonly occurring word, right, and then 1 which will be, let us say, off, and so on. Okay. So, what Zipf does is it tries to find out the relationship between the term frequency and the rank. Mandelbrot also is very similar to what Zipf does, and then we also try to figure out what are the co-occurrences of word. That means, how, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the patterns, we try to find out, okay, these 2 words always occur together. For example, you will find the words New York, right. So, you can find in the entire corpus how many times these 2 words occur together. So, since we are blindly doing it, we do not know what exactly the meaning of all those, we are just making the count of that. So, this is the very high level task that we do when a corpus is given to you, right. So, this is the first step. Any if you give any document, the first and the foremost thing that we do is do the counting without really knowing what the contents are and so on, and we look at the number of tokens, we look at the vocabulary, we try to compute the term frequency or IDF, or we also do a combination of term frequency, IDF, and so on and so forth. That is the first task that we do.